Fearsome Foursome. You've probably heard the name Fearsome Foursome. It's one of the most legendary defensive nicknames in NFL history, and it belongs to the Los Angeles Rams of the 1960s. But how did they earn that title? Let's rewind to 1963. The Rams had just put together 4 defensive linemen who would change the game: Deacon Jones, Merlin Olsen, Lamar Lundy, and Rosie Greer. Each one was a star in his own right: fast, powerful, and relentless. The phrase fearsome foursome had actually been used before to describe tough defensive lines in places like Detroit and New York. But it was the Rams version that defined it. Once LA sports writers saw the way this group dominated week after week, the nickname stuck and became legendary. Deacon Jones was the most famous. He literally coined the word sack and terrorized quarterbacks. Merlin Olsen brought intelligence and strength to the middle. Lamar Lundy was versatile and explosive, and Rosie Greer used his massive frame to clog up the run game. Together, they became the blueprint for every dominant defensive line that came after. Purple People Eaters. The Minnesota Vikings of the late 1960s and 70s were known for one terrifying thing: their defensive line. But this wasn't just any D-line. These guys were called the Purple People Eaters, and they earned every bit of that name. So where did it come from? Let's set the scene. It's the late 1960s. The Vikings have built a fearsome front four featuring Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and Gary Larson. The nickname actually came from a 1958 novelty song called Purple People Eater. From 1968 to 1976, they led the Vikings to 4 Super Bowl appearances and were the heart of one of the NFL's top defenses: Doomsday Defense. Back in the day, the Dallas Cowboys weren't just America's team. They were a nightmare for offenses. Their defense was so dominant, so suffocating, it earned a nickname straight out of a disaster movie: the Doomsday Defense. But how did they get that name? It started in the late 1960s, when the Cowboys' defense became one of the best in the league, led by stars like Bob Lilly, Mel Renfro, and Chuck Howley. A local writer coined the name Doomsday Defense to describe the chaos and destruction they caused on the field, and it stuck. This wasn't just branding, it was dominance. The Cowboys' defense was fast, aggressive, and always in the right place at the right time. Opposing quarterbacks knew that facing the Doomsday Defense meant pain, and probably a few turnovers. Steel Curtain. When you think of hard-hitting, blue-collar football, you think of Pittsburgh. And no defense in NFL history captured that identity better than the Steel Curtain. Let's go back to the early 1970s. The Pittsburgh Steelers were building a dynasty, and it started with their defensive line. 4 players who shut down the run, crushed quarterbacks, and set the tone for one of the NFL's most dominant teams. The key names? Mean Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Ernie Holmes, Jack Lambert, and Dwight White. These guys were relentless, fast, physical, and fearless. In 1971, a Pittsburgh radio contest asked fans to submit a nickname for the defense. The winning entry? The Steel Curtain, a nod to the city's steel industry and the impenetrable wall the defense created. By the mid-70s, the Steel Curtain became the heart of a team that won 4 Super Bowls in just 6 years. The name became so famous that it didn't just represent the defensive line, it came to symbolize the entire Steelers' defense and even the team's gritty, tough identity. Orange Crush. Before the Denver Broncos were known for John Elway or Peyton Manning, they were known for one thing: the Orange Crush defense. Let's rewind to the late 1970s. The Broncos had built a defensive unit that was fast, physical, and completely overwhelming. It was led by Randy Gradishar, a tackling machine at linebacker, along with Tom Jackson, Lyle Alzado, Barney Chavous, and a bunch of blue-collar players who played like every snap was life or death. The nickname Orange Crush was inspired by the popular orange soda. It was catchy, colorful, and perfectly matched the team's aggressive style. By 1977, the Orange Crush defense carried Denver to its first Super Bowl appearance in franchise history. They shut down offenses with a 3-4 scheme, which was still fairly new at the time, confusing quarterbacks and stuffing the run. And even though the Broncos didn't win that Super Bowl, the legend of the Orange Crush was sealed. They had put Denver football on the map. New York Sack Exchange. When it comes to fierce pass rushers, the New York Jets had their own legendary group in the late 1970s and early 1980s, known as the New York Sack Exchange. It started with four dominant players: Mark Gastineau, Abdul Salam, Joe Klecko, and Dennis Byrd. Together, they terrorized opposing quarterbacks and piled up sacks like no other. The nickname Sack Exchange was actually coined during a fan contest held by the Jets Report magazine. The contest aimed to find a catchy name for the team's formidable front four. The press loved the play on words. The New York Sack Exchange wasn't just about individual stars, it was the perfect combination of skill, power, and teamwork that made the Jets' defense one of the most feared units in the NFL. 85 Bears. When people talk about the greatest defense in NFL history, one name almost always comes up first: the 1985 Chicago Bears. In 1985, the Bears rolled out a defense that was as aggressive as it was innovative. Led by defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan, they ran the famous 46 defense, a scheme designed to completely overwhelm offenses by stacking the line of scrimmage and bringing pressure from everywhere. The result? Pure chaos. They allowed the fewest points and yards in the league and racked up 64 sacks. That year, Chicago went 15-1, shut out two teams in the playoffs, and crushed the Patriots 46-10 in Super Bowl 20. So who were the stars? You had Mike Singletary, the heart and soul at middle linebacker; Richard Dent, the Super Bowl MVP, terrorizing quarterbacks off the edge; Wilber Marshall, Otis Wilson, Dan Hampton, Steve McMichael. Every one of them played like a star. But it wasn't just their performance, it was their personality. This defense had swagger. They danced, they talked trash, and they backed it up. Their confidence was so big, the defense even starred in their own music video, the Super Bowl Shuffle. The 1985 Bears didn't just win, they dominated, and they did it with attitude. No-fly zone. If you were an NFL quarterback in the mid-2010s, you had one nightmare to avoid: the Denver Broncos' no-fly zone. The no-fly zone was Denver's nickname for their elite secondary, the group tasked with locking down the passing game. It wasn't just a catchy phrase, it meant no wide receiver was getting past this defense. Led by stars like Aqib Talib, Von Miller, Chris Harris Jr., and Darius Stewart, the Broncos built a shutdown secondary and defensive line that combined speed, skill, and physicality. From 2014 to 2016, the no-fly zone was a key part of Denver's dominant defense that helped the Broncos win Super Bowl 50. It wasn't just about coverage, it was about attitude, discipline, and relentless pressure. Legion of Boom. When you think of shutdown corners, punishing safeties, and a defense that strikes fear into offenses, you think of the Seattle Seahawks as Legion of Boom. Back in the early 2000s, the Seahawks built one of the most physical, hard-hitting secondaries in NFL history. The core players? Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and Bobby Wagner. The name Legion of Boom captured their physicality, booming hits, aggressive coverage, and a fearless attitude. They weren't just defenders, they were a tight-knit unit that communicated flawlessly and played with attitude. This secondary was the backbone of the Seahawks' defense that led Seattle to back-to-back Super Bowl appearances in 2013 and 2014, winning Super Bowl 48 in a dominating performance. They set the tone by locking down top receivers, forcing turnovers, and delivering bone-crushing hits that echoed through stadiums.